The 24-story Grenfell Tower was built in 1974 on a low-rent housing estate in North Kensington, west of London. Around 600 people lived in more than 120 apartments in the tower. Local residents say there had been repeated warnings about the safety of the building before the disaster. The tower recently underwent a $13 million refurbishment with new external cladding and window installations. The firm behind the work says the project met all required building regulations, but planning documents do not refer to a type of fire barrier that building safety experts said should be used when high-rise blocks are being re-clad. Authorities have promised to assess other tower blocks that were also recently refurbished. Well, CGTN's Richard Bestick has been keeping tabs on developments in London and joins us now live with an update. Richard, indeed, a few days have passed, and of course, rescue services are now saying there's little hope of finding any more survivors. Of course, some might hold on to any glimmer of hope at all, but at this stage, what do we know about the victims of the fire and those that might be still missing?
Well, the names of the victims are now coming out, and in particular the poignant last moments of the lives of those 17 people. Last phone calls to nearest and dearest. One in particular, Mohammed Al-Ajali, whose brother, 20-year-old Hashim, was among those who died. A last call between the two, one brother saying to the other, "Why did you leave me behind?" Now that clearly indicating the confusion, the panic, the dark, the smoke, the confused directions from those in authority, the terrible, dreadful last moments of these people. But that, as you were saying, that last that death list so far of 17 people, that is just the beginning. You mentioned there that there were some 600 people in the building. I spoke to people who were on the scene an hour after the fire started, within an hour and a half. If there had been 500, 600 people who'd been woken from their sleep during that fire, they say they would have seen it. The death toll, the police say, shouldn't go beyond 100. But the reality is that they have little idea of how many people were in that building. The search for the bodies will take months. Such was the intensity of the heat, and the police say that many people will never be identified because of the intense heat of the flames. Much of the sadness on the streets around that building, Grenfell Tower, is now turning to anger as people say, how could such a thing happen in a country like Great Britain?
And indeed, it is that anger that I suppose has really propelled Prime Minister Theresa May to authorise a public inquiry into the fire. At this stage, Richard, are there any initial indications on what may have caused that fire or why it was so difficult to put out?
Well, just addressing that issue of the Prime Minister's inquiry, she says it will be judge-led and will get underway as soon as possible. But her visit to the site has not calmed the anger of the people there by any means. She attended in what Downing Street described as a private visit. How you can have a private visit when you're the Prime Minister of the country visiting the site of a national tragedy is not really explained. But her visit did cause some anger, not just among fellow members of Parliament, but among those who live in the neighbourhood, because she went, but she didn't speak to the people. She spoke to the fire services, she spoke to the police, and then she returned to Downing Street to make a televised statement concerning the inquiry. There will be a number of inquiries, not just the inquiry from the judge-led inquiry from the Prime Minister, trying to find out whether that cladding could have contributed to the speed at which the flames raced through, tore through that building. But also I now understand that the Metropolitan Police Scotland Yard has launched its own criminal investigation into the materials that were used. So all the indicators at the moment appear to be pointing to the fact that money was saved to use cheaper materials to clad the building, perhaps within the fire regulations as they stood at the time, but most of the inquiries will be looking at whether that money-saving exercise could have contributed to what is mass tragedy.